Right out of the gate, I'm just going to say that no, I don't have any idea if this is supposed to be a prequel to the Michael Bay Transformers movies. For a while there, they were saying that even Bumblebee and Transformers Rise of the Beasts aren't even connected to the Michael Bay directed films, but I really don't understand how that could be because there's so many different tie ins and whatnot. And with this one, if it is connected to any of those movies, then there's a ton of continuity issues, so I'm just choosing to accept it as its own thing. But the title Transformers 1 does make it sound like it's meant to be a prequel, and we are getting the origin of Optimus Prime and Megatron and whatnot, so I really don't even know what to think. But if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that the Transformers films are the new X-Men films in terms of plaguing their franchise with continuity issues. So Transformers 1 is actually a really weird movie for me. When the initial announcement was made that they're making an origin story Transformers movie and it was going to be animated, I got excited at the idea of seeing Cybertron in a unique animated art style. When the trailer dropped, I got very, very hesitant because while the animation looked interesting, I could not stand what I was seeing in that trailer, and they did not do themselves any favors in the marketing. They made it seem like it was a movie made for 5-year-olds. And while, yes, Transformers has always been geared toward, younger audiences, it's just so jarring going from the 5 Michael Bay directed films and then the 2 that followed that were still more on the mature side, and then going to this.
On 3, 1. Where's my head? Look at wheels! I need wheels!
But then all of a sudden, early reviews were saying this was the best thing since sliced bread, and I was like, okay, I don't know if I believe you or not, but let's give it a shot. And then mixed reviews were coming in after that. IGN gave it a 5, although they don't have the best track record, and Rotten Tomatoes gave it like a 90-something%, but honestly, who even cares about that score anymore? But I was able to see this movie a week early since AMC was doing their early access screening at my local theater, and I was like, all right, let's give it a shot, see how it is. And wow, yeah, it's actually pretty good. The trailers do not do this film any justice. Now, yes, this is an origin story for Optimus Prime and Megatron and how they became the characters that they are in the more definitive versions of Transformers, but they're referred to as Orion Pax and D16 in this film for the majority of the time. I was really hesitant because Chris Hemsworth is voicing Optimus Prime instead of Peter Cullen, and that just felt really weird. I feel like if Optimus Prime isn't voiced by Peter Cullen, then why even bother? But honestly, Chris Hemsworth gave a pretty solid performance, and he did try to integrate some enunciations to sound more like Peter Cullen, and I did appreciate that for continuity's sake, or at least keeping the character at least on the same track. Brian Tyree Henry as Megatron. The scenes that you see in the trailer just are not a good representation of how good his performance is in this. He is a solid voice actor and just a solid actor in general, but he also knows his way around a recording studio when he's doing voice work. We've seen it in the Spider-Verse movies, and we're seeing it again here. There are some actors in Hollywood that, they can be the greatest actor on screen, but when you put them in a booth and you have them reading lines, they just don't know what they're doing, and thankfully, Brian Tyree Henry is not one of those people. Optimus and Megatron have really interesting arcs in this film, and usually I'm put off by this idea of let's take this iconic legendary hero and then deconstruct him down to his origin and see how he was brought up. I've never really cared for that in terms of really cool characters who just have a lot of mystery behind them, and it's better just to leave that mystery unsearched. We can, come up with our own headcanon or imagine, but sometimes having everything explained to you isn't always the most fun for moviegoers, and especially isn't always the most serviceable for narratives. Optimus Prime just seems like the type of character who's always been a leader, and it's hard to imagine him in any other position. So stripping away all his leadership and experience and battle strategy expertise down to when he was just a mining bot on Cybertron seems like a really weird way to do things, and honestly it just made me skeptical to the whole thing. But to be fair, they pulled it off pretty well, and they totally delivered. I think a good example of a bad origin story would be the Lightyear movie. I mean, let's be real. Nobody really wanted to see Buzz Lightyear as an astronaut. We wanted to see him as a space ranger. And so making this origin story movie about Buzz Lightyear, but it's not even the toy from the other Toy Story movies. It's some guy from a movie that inspired the toy. It just got all convoluted, and then they completely watered down that movie with everything that they were doing, and it just didn't work. This, I think, actually develops these characters well, has a lot of heart in the narrative, and between Optimus, Megatron, Elita, and Bumblebee, you have a pretty solid cast of characters, and the interactions between all of them, it feels like they are a team uniting for the first time, and that's really important when you're making something like Transformers where they operate as a unit in their prime. So seeing them try to actually work together cohesively is really, really important. The animation style is honestly really good. It combines a lot of just the old style of animation from the 80s cartoons and implements it in a way that makes it stand out against most modern animation while also giving it a very distinct style that harkens back to that era. I think a lot of people, especially these days, are getting used to and kind of sick of this, what I'm going to call Disney Studios animation style, where everything looks cartoony yet 100% realistic. And this doesn't really feel like that. You have robots on a robot planet. There's actually no humans in this movie whatsoever, which is a good sign because that just means that a Transformers movie can work without humans, so keep making more of those. And while things don't look 100% realistic or anything, it still feels realistic within the reality of this Cybertron planet. So animated or not, hyper realistic or not, you still feel like this all fits and honestly could translate into live action pretty seamlessly. This film just has a lot of heart, and these characters don't feel soulless and one-dimensional. They feel like they were actually had some thought put into them. I mean, we've always known that Optimus Prime and Megatron were united before they split off, so it's interesting to see the dynamic between who would eventually become these, mortal enemies and what they were when they were younger and more inexperienced, just working together as mining bots on Cybertron. Really enjoyed the action. There's a lot more in the second half of the movie than the first half. It takes a minute for these characters to actually figure out how to, transform and everything. They kind of show that in the trailer that they had to get a core or whatever, and there's a whole story behind that and how they get to that point. And honestly, I was happy that they didn't rush right into that and they actually built it up a little bit more. For those of you wondering, yes, Keegan-Michael Key plays Bumblebee, and yes, he is just as Keegan-Michael Key as any of his other characters he's ever played before. I think he is funny occasionally. Some of the jokes don't land as well as others, but it works, I think it's kind of jarring going from Dylan O'Brien voicing him in the Bumblebee movie, or just Bumblebee not having a voice at all in any of the Michael Bay movies for the most part, and then having this super hyper energetic Keegan-Michael Key voice coming out of him. But, Bumblebee's always kind of been a little bit more eccentric with his, expressions and mannerisms, even without his voice. So this kind of fits with that hyper energetic personality. Now, I can't speak for everyone, of course, but I'm sure some parents out there are curious about the content of the film and whether it's appropriate for children, whatever. This movie's rated PG, which is a step down from the other Transformers movies, which get a little bit more vulgar and perverse depending on who's directing them, namely Michael Bay. But in this one, it's really tame. I think you're safe for the most part as long as you don't mind showing your kid a movie where they say
Badassatron
like 5 times. That's really the most inappropriate part of the film. So I don't want to talk about spoilers or go into what happens at the end or anything, but I gotta say that this film really resonated with me, and I did not expect it to. Again, I saw that first trailer and I'm like, this looks like a bunch of little kid garbage, and that's disappointing to me because I like Transformers and I wanted a good movie, but I don't know if I'm gonna get that. Then the second trailer came out and I was like, okay, maybe I misjudged too quickly. And then suddenly, I'm seeing this movie play out in front of me and I'm like, man, this is like actually really solid. And there's just some great character moments, and as this is an origin story, you're kind of building up to the point where these characters are becoming their, iconic, definitive forms. And so every step along that path just made me more and more excited as I was watching the movie. It also helps that this isn't a terribly long film. Some of Michael Bay's movies in this franchise go on for almost 3 hours long, and this clocks in at like an hour 45. There are seriously moments in this movie where I got chills watching a Transformers animated origin story. Going in, I didn't think I was ever going to be capable of loving this movie. Matter of fact, I didn't even think I was going to like it all that much. I wanted to give it a chance just to see what these reviews were all about, but man, I gotta say, I have very little complaints about this film. and it's definitely one of the better entries in the Transformers series. I kid you not, when the credits started rolling, the audience applauded. Now, me personally, do I think this is the greatest Transformers movie ever made? No, not necessarily, but believe me, this is far more captivating and far more entertaining than most of the other soulless films that plague this franchise, like Revenge of the Fallen, Age of Extinction, and The Last Knight. I would put this in like the top 4 section. For me personally, I still got the original from 2007 right above it, and then Bumblebee just on top of that. And my top pick will always be Dark of the Moon. I've never understood why people suddenly hated on that movie. When I was 11 years old, that was the coolest freaking thing I ever saw in the theater. But overall, my prediction was that this film was going to absolutely suck and completely tank at the box office, and I am very happy to be completely and utterly wrong. I don't know financially how this film is going to do, but critically it's doing well, so I hope that means we can get a sequel, because I would definitely love a sequel to this film, regardless of where it fits into the continuity. Continue this off as its own standalone thing and just make a solid Transformers trilogy or 4 films or whatever you want to do. Just make a solid origin story for these characters before the fall of Cybertron. I think people definitely would love to see. So if you're a fan of the Transformers franchise and you wanted something new and fresh to enter this series because it's been kind of stale for the past few years, I think you'll enjoy this a great deal. If you have never seen a Transformers movie in your life, I think this is a pretty solid introduction outside of like maybe the first Michael Bay movie to these characters and to this world. And as for final score, I'm going to give this one a Alright, so Transformers 1, what do you think? Did you see it and like it? Did you see it and hate it? Do you think that this is one of the best in the franchise? Do you think it is dead last in your ranking of this series? Do you think that we need more of these, or is this completely and utterly pandering to children and just exploiting the IP for absolutely no worth? I would love to hear what you have to say in the comments down below. I will be sure to check those out, but please be respectful about it. No need to go at each other's throats over it. It's just a movie after all, not the most important thing in the world. By the way, if you're interested in anything else I have to offer, I have many links in the description. I would love if you would click on those. They will take you to my Instagram, my Letterboxd, my Serialized, and my GG accounts. If you don't know what those last 3 are, Letterboxd is where I post my movie reviews, Serialized is where I post my TV show reviews, and GG is where I post my video game reviews. All those are in the description, not your fingertips, and a lot of the content posted on those never makes it onto this channel. And so if you want more content similar to what I'm producing on this YouTube channel, then I highly suggest checking those out. But if you like this review, like this video, and if you want more videos like these to show up in your feed, then I highly suggest clicking that subscribe button so you can stay informed of when I'm posting new reviews. I'll have plenty more on the horizon as the movies are coming out. And until then, God be with you, and take care.